You're listening to The Higher Ed Marketer, the podcast for marketing professionals in higher education. Join us every week as we talk to the industry's greatest minds in student recruitment, donor relations, marketing trends, new technologies, and much more. If you're looking for conversations centered around where marketing in higher ed is going, this podcast is for you. Let's get into the show.
Welcome to the Higher Ed Marketer Podcast. My name is Troy Singer, and I'm here with my co-host and good friend, Bart Kaler. And I think I can speak on both of our behalfs. We are super excited because we are bringing you wisdom from the immediate past president of the National Council for Marketing and Public Relations. His name is Jeff Ebbing. He is with Southeastern Community College in Iowa. And what we talked about with him covers the gamut and is really great when it comes to higher ed marketing and making it impactful.
Yeah, I really love this conversation with Jeff. I think that he really brought his A game to this. I mean, he talked about, the challenges and the opportunities at community colleges, but I think we talked about how that can apply to just about every school. So whether you're a flagship or whether you're at a very small school, a lot of what we talked about is so applicable. And I think he also gets into just how to lead well as a marketer to the rest of your institution. I mean, the president, the dean, the provost, they're looking to you to provide that marketing expertise, and don't give that up. And so really some really good, valuable things in that. And I'm also, Troy, excited to share that this episode is sponsored by some of our good friends at NextGrad. I know you and I both are big fans of what they do. And let me tell you a little bit about them now. They are North America's largest higher education advertising network. The NextGrad network generates millions of impressions every month in over 1,100 high schools in 82 media markets all across the United States and Canada. But what makes NextGrad unique is their network of digital kiosks that's located in high traffic locations inside these high schools. Students view helpful educational content and ads from colleges, universities, trade schools, military recruiters, and even public health advertisers. NextGrad literally helps high school students decide what's next. The NextGrad network is disrupting the old-fashioned college bulletin board, and they're redefining how students learn about higher education. So if you're interested in reaching high school students on their own turf, when and where they're making critical decisions about their educational future, then NextGrad is for you. To learn more, I encourage you to reach out to my friends at nextgrad.com, nextgrad.com. Email them at info@nextgrad.com or call them at 801-336-5220. Leave a message, and that's 801-336-5220, or visit nextgrad.com. NextGrad is the high school opportunity network. So with that, Troy, I think we're ready to get started.
Yes, a shout out to our friends at NextGrad, especially Mike and Ryan. Love you guys. And now, here is a conversation with Jeff Ebbing. Jeff, thank you for joining us on the podcast. And we begin all of our episodes with the following question. And that is, if you've learned something here recently that you would find fun or interesting to share with our listeners.
Thanks for having me on the podcast. I think that something that I've learned really in this past week is that if this gig in higher ed doesn't work, I have a future as a appliance repairman.
Oh.
I'm going to break a podcast rule and say that we're actually a week out from Thanksgiving and we're hosting, and so we're going to be 18 people at our house. And of course, when you're preparing for the Thanksgiving, you got to do a lot of stuff to get the house ready. Yep. Well, my dishwasher decided to stop working. Our oven decided to stop working. And there's this little puddle of water right next to my furnace. We just turned it on last week. And I work at a community college, so I don't have this call the repairman kind of money. So it was me and YouTube, and I managed to successfully repair the dishwasher and the oven and the furnace in one weekend. I didn't get much else done, but I'm going to hope. The only thing I have to do now is just not burn the turkey, and I should be okay.
That's great.
Love that. And I know it's very stressful, all that going on right before Thanksgiving week. So kudos to you. And it's either going to be your next career or it could be a side gig.
Yeah, we all need a side hustle these days, don't we?
There we go.
Jeff, you spent a lot of your career in and working with community colleges all across the country. For our listeners who haven't worked in this space, what is some of the uniqueness of the community college world?
Well, we're open access institutions, and so we have to meet people where they are. And while you might be a four-year selective school or a public or something like that, where you have an admissions process where you can choose your students to a large degree, community colleges cannot. So we might have a student who is a junior or a senior taking a dual credit class. We might have a 50-year-old person who never thought in their wildest dreams they would be going to college because their plant shut down. We might have a high school student who graduated as the valedictorian, but who wants to save money by going to community college for 2 years. We might have somebody who were down on their luck and they dropped out of high school and they had to get their high school equivalency. We have to meet those people and serve them in whatever way they need served, and they all need to be served differently. And so community colleges, we have a really broad scope in our mission, and it's important that we're able to serve those people. And it's something that's really dear to my heart. I've seen so many success stories come out of that it's really rewarding work to be able to do that. But it is really challenging for anybody across the board, whether you're in academics or student services or even in marketing, how you're able to tackle that wide of a gamut of people.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because I've done some work with community colleges myself, and I think that it's one of those situations that if you're not aware of it, especially from a marketing standpoint, it's real easy to try to apply, templated type of things. It doesn't work that way. I think to your point, even, whether it's selective 4-year, whether it's just a private 4-year, a public 4-year, it's different when you've got a traditional undergrad student versus a non-traditional student, either an adult student or, like you said, there's a wide spectrum. And so being able to not only talk to them where they are, but also be able to communicate the benefits of the community college for them through marketing, I think is one of the challenges, because sometimes it's not the 3 in a tree type thing where you've got 3 students sitting under a tree reading a book. There's a lot more of what's real life. How am I going to take care of my kids while I'm doing classes? How is this flexible? Things like that. So tell me a little bit about, maybe unpack that a little bit from the marketing strategies that you're all doing with Southeastern Community College, but also your background in marketing and how all that fits together as well.
Sure. I think the biggest thing when it comes to, in my realm, when I am marketing the college, I'm not marketing the college with the competition being the college down the road or someplace across the state. It's life. I'm communicating I'm competing with, can I go to school? Can I succeed? Do I have the home life to support me being able to go to school and be successful? So that is a totally different than competing against the university down the road with the thises and the that's. So that's a really big difference that perhaps some other institutions might not have in their realm. And what I find that's the most successful is just really making things relevant. You can say we don't cost as much as X. If you're a 17, 18-year-old kid, oftentimes we don't really have that concept of how much that money actually means. What does a student loan mean? Oh yeah, I'm going to pay money, but I'm going to make money, so it'll be no problem. Well, $30,000 is, $35,000 is the average student loan debt. That's $200 a month for 20 years. Do you want to pay $200 a month for 20 years? That makes more sense. A student can start to understand that. So really putting those types of things into context, I think helps them understand really the decision that they're making and the value proposition that's there for us.
That's great. And I love that, bringing it down to that relevancy, and understanding your students well enough. I mean, that's part of when you get into persona work and some of those other things where you have to understand who your audience is. And it's that one size doesn't fit all. And I also really appreciate the fact too of you're competing against life. And sometimes I think that we think about that. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm competing against life with the types of things with, childcare, with finances, with, pulling it off at home and things like that. But I think one thing that I've noticed, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, Jeff, is that sometimes you're competing against confidence. do they have the confidence? Do they feel like they can actually do it? Talk about that, because I think that's such a big part of marketing in community colleges.
That is especially true when we're recruiting and talking to adult students, people who are not a traditional age. And a few years ago, we worked on an ad campaign, so we tried to find students who really, hey, let's find some folks who really resonate the message that we want to be able to share. So we sat this lady down in front of a camera, and it didn't matter what we said, we just pushed record, and everything she said was gold. From a marketing perspective, she talked about how she came to college. When she came to the college, just to go walk in the door to ask for what it's like, what could she possibly take? She said that was harder for her than any other test she had, any other assignment that she did, just literally getting out of the car and walking into the admissions office and asking them, how do I go to school? Does it work for me? It was such a powerful message, and I've seen and heard that type of thing multiple times over and over. So you're right. And what I also talk about, and I've written about this in blogs before, it's always, everything is only obvious until after you've done it. I don't know why that was, I always knew that was the case, but you have to get them over that hump. And how do you do that? Well, a lot of it is showing people who look like me that I can do it too. We as marketers might get tired of that message, or it seems stale, but we also know it's not until your accountant gets tired of the message you need to worry that it's old and stale, because everyone else has heard it so many times. Yeah. It's just really the repetition and people seeing themselves in this space.
Yeah, and I think that's important to kind of for our listeners to hear. I think sometimes we get so stuck on the techniques, the data, the analysis that we need to do, the way that we're going to use our digital campaigns, the creativity, the brand. Those are all important things. Don't get me wrong on that. I believe that, and I'm a part of that. I do that every day. But I think sometimes we forget to lean into the soft skills, the empathy, the emotion that it takes for some of these students to make those decisions, to really put ourselves in their shoes and really say, what's going to resonate with me? What's going to resonate with that particular student? And I know one of the things I've noticed too sometimes with the work that I've done with the community college is that there's a lot of times people, whether it's the prospective students, whether it's their influencers, whether it's even just the industry itself, there's a lot of unfair misconceptions that surround students and community colleges. So how do you address those misconceptions in some of the efforts that you guys are doing?
I think one of the biggest things that I've really tried to work on over my time at Southeastern is to really not make ourselves, don't position ourselves as the college of last resort. I want us to be in the original consideration set. So how have I done that? I talk about putting grains of sand in your head, and it takes me 10, 15, 20 years every day. If I can put one grain of sand in your head, after 20 years, that's a brick. That's a lot of weight that I put into your mind. Recruiting locally, being in the area, we're not a destination school. So I'm talking to you, I'm talking to your parents, I'm talking to your teachers, I'm talking to your counselors over the course of a super long haul, that by the time you really are seriously thinking about school, we're there. We're cemented in your head to a certain degree. Hopefully you've been to an event, you've seen our sports teams participate, or you've seen our students do things, or the college is in the parade, whatever it is. We've planted all those little grains of sand in your head, so that way when you are at that point to think about it, we're able to sort of, hey, we're here and you can think about us. I've tried to lead with some strong taglines in the past. One that I really am proud of that we did for about 7 or 8 years is think SEC, think again. And we had a president who's been around for about 12 years. And when I started this campaign, he'd only been here for a few years. But he came in, and over the course of about 10 years now, we've invested $50 million in facilities and upgrades and programming and equipment. And everything that we really were lacking up to that point, we've addressed, and we're parity with a lot of schools that students might be thinking about. But if you haven't been there in 10 or 15 years, you're thinking of the old place. Yeah. So come in, see what we are, see what we're doing, and then they can sense that. And that's also been able to help. It's pretty bold to go out there and put yourself out there like that, think again. Mm-hmm. But as long as we're able to deliver, which I believe we are, that holds true.
Yeah. I also really appreciate what you just said there too. I mean, you talked a lot about brand awareness, but it's brand awareness beyond billboards, radio, those types of things. It's actually being in their lives. It's being with their, talking to their student counselors, being at the local fair, being at the local event. It's those things that are just as much brand awareness. And I used to do some work in the alumni council at my alma mater, and they would always talk about, we're not doing fundraising, we're doing friend. And I think sometimes helping people understand that is such an important part.
I agree, and that's something that it's free. It's in your repertoire. You don't even realize it. And so I think it's not something that the first thing you go to pick up. You mentioned before, there's always a great tactic. There's a digital this, there's a new platform, there's a whatever. But if you don't have the basics of, let's make sure we're getting in front of the people and speaking to them in the way that they want to be spoken to in the places where they are, none of the tech matters. You have to know how to use it to be effective with it.
Yeah.
Jeff, a little earlier in the conversation, you were describing some actions and some activities that you're doing in the community that I feel helped build authentic connections with the students and your community. As we know, community colleges often serve diverse populations, and as the marketing leader, how do you ensure that your marketing resonates with such a wide audience?
Well, you definitely, I tell people when students come in to job shadow or people ask me about what we do, I say I'm always finding a new way to say that. I'm always looking to find a way to say the same thing in a different way every day. And that's the same is true when you're talking to different ages and different demographics. A young person is going to respond to a different kind of message than a parent, certainly what they're going to want for their child. And that would be different than necessarily even an adult student who's coming back or starting college for the first time after never thinking they were going to go. It's still speaking to them in that manner. I try to start with the message, and then I find the and the person, and then I find the medium that matches that. So there's still traditional means that are worthy for us to explore. We still do radio. We still do some outdoor. Obviously, we definitely are on social platforms as well because our people are there. And likewise, we're on other channels as well because that's where other folks are. So we're pretty diversified. That does cause us to really spread our budgets thin. Again, community colleges, public institutions, we're not flush with cash. So really understanding some of the analytics behind it, where are our people, what are the returns looking like, that helps us decide where we want to allocate that money. There's never enough to go around. I'm always getting knocked on the door. Hey, advertise this program, do that, do whatever. It's a little bit of strength to push back sometimes because I don't want to say we get bullied around, but you got a VP comes on the door, your president, we have to really be able to speak to truth to that power and say, these are the things that we know will work. I can spend that money, but we may not see a return. I would suggest we try these things and have those conversations as well. It's being a steward of our resources and doing what we know we're supposed to be doing.
Jeff, yeah, I agree with you. Just so many times, I think whether it's a community college, whether it's some smaller schools that I work with, resources are a challenge. And I think that you have to analyze what you're doing with every penny. You have to look at it. You have to see what the return on that investment is, and you have to make wise decisions. And I think that I'm so encouraged to hear that you guys are doing some of those things. And I guess one of the other things too that I often hear, that especially when you're looking for those ways to best impact your marketing dollars, is leveraging storytelling to really make those marketing efforts more relatable, impactful. How do you guys at Southeastern really kind of lean into storytelling as part of your approach?
Well, certainly we leverage things like our student ambassador program. That's been helpful for us. I think one of the challenges, though, even with like a student ambassador program, when you've got students for 2 years versus 4 years, it's hard to maintain continuity. So it can be a challenge to manage, but when you have those students, they can be an excellent extension of your team to be able to tell that story, to bounce ideas off of, does this sound right? Are you responding? Oh, that's a terrible idea. That sounds so hokey. Or vice versa. We hit on something. So definitely working with ambassadors is a useful tool that we use. But then it's always just following what's going on in their classes and in the programs. Some of these instructors do amazing things, and I've been fortunate enough in that recently. Well, Unfortunately for media, local newspapers have lost quite a bit of ground, right? But that also means there's a lot of photographers who are looking to find some part-time work. And so I've been able to recruit an amazing photographer from our former local newspaper. He's out and about. He's taking amazing pictures that we never otherwise would have been able to get out of our office to do. And so when he goes in there and he takes a picture of the astronomy class that goes to the local observatory, and I didn't even know they were doing it. Now we can go and talk to those students. Otherwise, we never would have known about it. Or having people boots on the ground in these spaces is just a resource that it's an affordable resource that we're able to pull those and actually seek those folks out that might have otherwise just gone unnoticed by us.
Yeah, that's great. And I do appreciate just some of the things you just illustrated with the idea of being able to have a part-time photographer, being able to have those boots on the ground, and I know a lot of times many of us that are, especially folks that are listening to this podcast, I know a lot of people because they've come up and told me that, man, this is like professional development. I'm getting these great ideas. I don't have my budgets. You're giving me great ideas. So a lot of people are feeling that pinch of being understaffed or underfunded. And Jeff, I know you and I have talked about, just full transparency. We're doing some training with Jeff and his team with generative AI. And I know that's one area to lean into, but what are you sometimes coaching other schools that find themselves in this really tight spot with budgets and staffing and things like that? I mean, you talked a little bit about the freelance photographers. What are some of the other things that maybe you're doing that requires you to be creative as the person tasked with getting everything done?
Well, I think to a certain degree, when you have a small shop, we're fortunate enough to have gone from 3 people to 4 people just this year. And not a lot of my colleagues are able to say that. So as you might be familiar too, and maybe I've shared this with people, there are so many techs out there. There's so much things that we have to learn, AI, whatever. We'll never all be super good at all of them. Right. So I try to tell people to lean into where they're good. If I'm never going to learn a pivot table, why should I spend 12 hours trying to get a partly correct pivot table? Let me lean into what I'm good at, find somebody who can help me with that, sort of like the photographer example. If you're able to, when you're trying to allocate budget and resources, time is also a resource that I think a lot of people don't really consider. So again, I can spend half my day working on some data, and if that's not my thing, I've just like taking cash and burning it because I could have been doing something else. So if you do have some dollars that are available, maybe you try to outsource some of those things that you'll never be good at, accept it, understand that where you need to be in that space, you need to be very familiar with it and understand the basics, but find someone who can help you do that kind of thing. I guarantee you can Google anybody to find something to do for you and they'll charge you something. And it can be very affordable. So find partners who are out there who can help you do the things that you're really lacking and that you can lean into the really important work that you want to do. Certainly AI is part of that. But again, don't be afraid. Oh, I can't handle this. I'm not a good video editor. I'm a terrible photographer. I can't write. Whatever it is that you're not good at, do the things that you are good at, and find some little places where you can farm some of that off to some skilled talent.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. What is the Clifton Strength Finders, where it's like you figure out what your 5 strengths are, lean into that with all your might, and hire out or delegate to the other things. So that's a really good point.
Jeff, as the former NCMPR president, how has your leadership experience influenced your approach to adapting to the changes in marketing trends?
Well, a lot. I started my job, and this was my first and only position really in higher ed at this point, is at Southeastern Community College. And about the same time I started my job, I got a postcard from NCMPR. What's that? And it was great for me because I was the second person ever to have my job at my college, and the previous guy was only there for a year and a half. So I had no mentors, there was no track record, there was no plan, there was no nothing. And so being able to find this organization, I grew in the organization as I grew in my career at my college. And so that was really a lifeline for me. I learned everything. I wouldn't be where I am doing what I'm doing with the confidence that I have if it wasn't for that organization. So with all of that said, I really lean into that to work with my colleagues who are new to their profession or who want to level up or who just need a shoulder to cry on, of someone to vent to. What I really learned is to be successful in this type of a career, you need to have a network. and you need to lean on the other folks who are around you, who you can bounce ideas off of. And ideally, they should be outside of your institution's four walls, because even then, you're still inside the bottle. You need to see what they're doing in California and Connecticut and Florida and Michigan and Iowa, because it's all different. And at the same time, there's ideas that can be learned and shared across that. So when it comes to seeing what's out there and seeing the leadership and seeing the ideas, being plugged into that national network of people it's really vital to be successful.
That's great. I know that there are so many people that say exactly that same thing, for whether it's NCMPR, whether it's NACAP, whether it's, there's a ton of them out there. And I think that you're right. I think that sometimes those become lifelines. They become those ability for you to create friendships. Because one thing that I've learned, I've done a lot of work in different verticals in my career. And one thing I love about higher ed is that there's not a lot of secrets. Everybody's willing to share with each other, what's working with them, what's working with our school, sometimes even in the same market. I find that really, I applaud that, because I really like that. And I think that is helping. It helps new people into the industry, and it also just reminds us of, at the end of the day, we're really trying to improve people's lives. We're not selling a widget or a gadget and trying to commoditize it or something. So I applaud you for doing that. But I guess, what does that role that you've played and kind of what you've learned with adaptability? And I'm sure that this comes up a lot in the conferences and even in a lot of the magazine and the different things that the organizations puts out. And we talked about it earlier, but just from the adaptability of being able to kind of lean into these new digital tools, lean into AI, lean into different techniques that maybe you've learned at these conferences, how does that adaptability, why is that so important for a leader in higher education?
Well, I think a lot of us, when we enter our professions, we're good at marketing, or we have a knack for a certain subset, or have a skill in that realm. And then we come in and we do well, and then we get promoted to be a director or in a leadership position. But there's not, at least for the marketing function within higher ed, there's not a real good development plan. If I'm in the academic realm, there are paths for me to move in and to move up on the academic side, whether it's a dean or a tenured faculty person, or if I'm on the student services side, there are pipelines and ladders that you can climb. But if you're a marketing director, how do you learn those skills? And I think there's a lot of things that, regardless how good of a marketer you are, can you lead a team? Can you hold your own in institutional conversations? How can you work with your president to support their goals? Mm-hmm. Those are crucial marketing skills that you're not going to find in a marketing book, that you're not going to learn in class, or things that you have to learn largely on your own. Hopefully you've got a mentor to help you through that. You can read tips and write blogs and follow podcasts and kind of catch up on all this kind of stuff. But a lot of it is learning by doing, and having the confidence to be in those spaces and to be willing to take a risk on yourself, but also trust your instincts that you are a marketer. I think that's one of the challenges. Being adaptable is stepping into that situation and knowing that of all the people in the room, you're the marketing person. You have the best perspective, not the dean, not the admissions counselor, sometimes not the president. And hold that space and be own that space and fill that void.
I so appreciate you saying that, because that's been a little bit of my soapbox these last few months, because I know you're familiar with it, Jeff, but my book, I talk a little bit about the role of marketers in higher education. I think too often we sit back as marketers and we just accept our role as the institutional Kinkos, where, hey, everybody just gives us something, we're supposed to make it look prettier by Monday. And I've talked a lot about that on the podcast. It's something I'm passionate about, because I think you're exactly right. We have to step into our role that says, you know what, from a marketing standpoint, we are the experts on campus. And while there might be a lot of people who might claim to have a gut feel about something, or maybe some instincts about something, and sometimes they're spot on. The president might be spot on about a marketing instinct, or a provost might have a thought that's spot on. But far too often, I think that we kind of either relegate our responsibility away, or we don't input ourselves into where we should. So an example many times that I run into is, one of the 4 P's of marketing is product. very seldom do the marketers get asked to participate in, we have a new program that we're considering offering. And when it comes to marketing, it's like, we're ready to promote underwater basket weaving, bring us 800 students. It's like, well, nobody wants that program. And so there's very little understanding about what goes into marketing, what marketing research can do. So just talk a little bit about that, Jeff, because I see you kind of nodding your head that's something that you've experienced.
That's definitely true. And I'm sure that everyone who listens can tell you 3 or 4 programs at their institution, they scratch their head why they exist, but there's a good chance that it was a pet project by somebody. And I don't want to throw people under the bus for that, because sometimes they just don't have the information, like you're saying, as to why what was the process to vet that decision to invest 6 figures, 7 figures, big institutions could be 8 figures into a program that maybe isn't going to pan out for maybe ever. Right. And so I've tried to make sure that I get as far forward in the train as I can. I'm not going to be the conductor, that's the president, but I can try to be right up there next to him to have when those conversations are had, and not be at the caboose like you're talking about. We're the last person to know, the last person to do all this kind of stuff. It requires you got to stick your neck out, you got to step in, and you have to lead with numbers and data that says, well, we can do a market analysis that says, sure, there's this exists in this area. For community colleges, normally a lot of times that are going to drive that is a couple key employers, and generally those facilities, they're in a hard time. They need more widget makers, and for whatever reason, widget making is hot right now. Well, it's hot right now, and so we might respond to that because that person's the big donor of the college. And I'm not trying to be oversimplistic, but that can happen.
Sure.
Or they're big supporters in the community. And so we've launched this program, but like you're saying, no one in the town wants to do that, because maybe it's a minimum wage job and they got to go to school for 3 years, 2 years, whatever it is, and they're upside down. And so those are the kind of things that we have to be able to bring to the table. Savvy academic leaders, savvy presidents, savvy leadership within the organization will pay attention to that, but sometimes only to a certain extent.
Right.
And again, most of us marketers, we're way outside of our general realm of what they expect out of us. So sometimes finding polite, appropriate ways to speak truth to that power can help.
Yeah. And I always tell my team sometimes when I come back and tell my stories from the road, they're like, why are they thinking that way? Why do they do that? And I'm like, they don't know what they don't know. And I think that's a common refrain that I'm starting to realize that I'm understanding that many times higher education might be the only thing that people have ever lived in. It might be the only career they've ever been a part of. Academia might be the only part that they've ever been a part of. And so there's a lot of things that, people just don't know what they don't know. And it's our responsibility and role as a marketer to help educate them. They're educating our students. Let's educate one another internally about that as well.
As we wrap up, Jeff, what is one piece of advice or insight that you could leave with our listeners that they can put into practice almost immediately?
I will go back to some of what we were talking about just a little bit ago, and that is take up space. You were hired to be the marketing person. Someone looked across the table at you after they talked to a whole bunch of other people who interviewed, and they picked you to do that job. Be that person. So many of us will step in and will be a little bit timid and will let that space get chipped away. This vice president will take some, that dean will take some, that person will take some, and you go from a space that's this big to a space that's this big, and it is super hard to push back out. So lean into that space of who you are, who you were hired to be, fill that role, because it is really hard to get back. When you do that and when you push out, you get the credibility, you get the confidence, you get the buy-in from your colleagues that when there's a marketing issue, they come to you, they respect you, and they'll listen to you, and you'll be a player at the table.
Yeah, love that.
Thank you. We've been talking to Jeff Ebbing of Southeastern Community College in Iowa. Jeff, if someone would like to reach out to you and connect further, what would be the best way for them to do so?
Well, I would say smoke signals, but if you don't live close to my house, it's probably not going to work. So I would suggest meeting me on LinkedIn. Certainly, Jeff Ebbing. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active. Share things, write things. Happy to meet up with you.
Very good. Again, thank you for joining us on the Higher Ed Marketer podcast. Bart, do you have any final thoughts that you would like to share?
Yeah, I really appreciate this episode, Jeff. I think you brought a lot of wisdom and direction that I think I would really encourage people to kind of maybe rewind and listen to a few things. I think that some of the things, I mean, especially when I know a lot of people are like, hey, well, I'm not at a community college, I'm at XYZ college. Well, that's the point. There are things that you can look at because, I mean, everybody's different. Every school is going to be different. You're going to serve different students. You're going to have different flavor depending on where you are regionally. And so leaning into that and understanding what makes your prospective students unique, being able to kind of step into their shoes. We talked a lot about that empathy and that understanding of what are those unique needs of your particular students. I don't care if it's a community college, if it's a state school, if it's a flagship, if it's a small faith-based Bible college, there are unique things that your prospective students want. And that's a lot of what I talk about with Chasing Mission Fit. You've got to understand who you are and who those mission fit students are. And I also just really appreciate just kind of this idea of authentic connections with those students and the communities and being able to manage those resources well and being able to step into those places that only you can kind of fill in your institution and having the confidence to do that. And so again, if you want to reach out to Jeff to talk more about that, or even Troy or myself, happy to talk about that anytime on just helping you kind of step into those places. So again, Jeff, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks, Freedom. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Bart. And thank you, our listeners, for tuning in to another episode of the Higher Ed Marketer podcast. If today's conversation was helpful, please consider subscribing, rating, or leaving us a review. You can also follow us on LinkedIn to stay updated on upcoming episodes and the latest news. The Higher Ed Marketer podcast is powered by Kaler Solutions, your go-to partner for higher ed mission fit marketing strategies, enrollment, and branding needs. And sponsored by Ring Digital, your ad targeting people. With our powerful technology, we ensure your message connects with the right audience to maximize impact. On behalf of Bart Kaler, Jeff Ebbing, and myself, Troy Singer, thank you so much for listening today.